It'll require some bold ideas. It'll require some discussion. But overall, I think it's much easier to agree on where we want to go, to agree on the future that we want, but it's much harder to agree on how we want to get there. And so this debate is intended to dive into the how, to really have the difficult conversations, to openly interrogate the assumptions that we hold that underpin our work, to openly disagree with one another, which often doesn't happen. And we're doing this today because we believe that we can gather and unearth some key information that we need to design more nuanced and more effective solutions as we move forward. So that is the intention of the debate. And I want to introduce some key principles, if we can share them on the slides, before we go in. So we just have some ground rules for everybody. So there's 3 basic principles of our first ever GLF debate. I'd say the first one is to be forward-thinking and to be solution-oriented. So we want to focus on issues and solutions, not on attacking people and organizations. It's important to talk about the challenges of the past, the things that we've learned in the past, but let's focus on the future and where we are going. The second one, as always with the GLF, is to accurately provide information and evidence that grounds our perspectives. And the third is the most important, the one that I'm most excited about. It is to be open to new perspectives, maintaining an open mind. So in just a moment, we're going to hear 3 answers to the question, should we use development aid for food sovereignty in the continent? Will this actually advance us to a more sovereign food future? But before we do, I want everyone to kind of let go of your answer to the question and join the journey of immersing yourself in someone else's mind and their perspectives for the 2 minutes that they make their opening statements. So let's leave our own selves for a moment and let's enter the worlds of 3 incredible people who are gonna be able to answer that question for us. So if we all agree, and I think we do, I'm gonna welcome our first speaker to the stage to make his remarks. This is Dr. Mordecai Ogada, yeah. He is a policy thinker. He's an author of The Big Conservation Lie, a policy scholar with over 20 years of experience from our world, but also openly questioning it. And he's going to share why his answer to the question is no. Dr. Ogada, over to you. You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, and it's great to be here with you and a few moments to share my thoughts, and you'll understand hopefully my answer at the end of it all. I'll just get my slides on there. You put up my slides? I've got a few slides there. Okay. Yeah, I think this question is a question of principle. So I'm attempting to answer it from a position of principle and what we can do. Okay, that's my first slide. Got food systems, livelihood systems in Africa. I'm from the conservation field, so forgive me for using conservation type pictures. That's what it's like, diverse, beautiful, very complex. And this is where a lot of the principles that the aid is coming from. This is what it looks like where the principles are coming from. Monocultures, organized, fenced, barriers, consumptive. That's where all of the principles behind the aid is coming from, because aid comes from a place, and think back to what the origins, it came from a savior type place. And that's the difficulty we face, because when it comes from a savior type of thinking, there's a complex. Now, this is the way we use these resources. I mean, I don't need to name all those things, but there's medicinal plants, there's food plants, there's grazing in these forests, and there's all these different uses for our systems, our food systems. So they're complex like that. But if back to the organized one, totally extractive, that forest is used for wood. This is what comes out of those forests. or from that system, it's one thing. It's material, it's very profitable, it's extracted, and it's extracted in total. So if we look at our systems, to utilize our systems and maximize them and bolster them when they're hit by things like climate shocks, etc., these are the sort of tools we need. Something to prune plants, tools to pick fruits, tools to rake up whatever we get from the trees, etc. And this is what we should get in aid. Things that bolster our indigenous food systems and the way we use them. But instead, what we get is this: extractive tools. And this is not sustainable. And that's where the challenge lies. So what I'm saying is that what we are doing now cannot be used to enhance food sovereignty, because it's not built for that purpose. And we have a whole structure of people who have made this thing their career. And if you achieve this sovereignty, it might consign them to irrelevance. And that's the problem of principle that we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ogala. We'll have an opportunity for discussion for those online to have your questions. We'll pose them in a discussion later. But before we do, I want to welcome to the stage someone who will answer the question with yes. This is Dr. Nancy Rapando. She is the WWF leader for Africa's Food Future Initiative. Nancy is a farmer, a sustainable agricultural specialist with broad experience in Africa in program management, policy analysis, and technical advisory work. Welcome, Nancy. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult question to say if it's a yes or no, but I think what is important is understanding what are the issues, what are the principles, and what is happening. So from where I stand, yeah, the Africa food system that is mainly dominated by the smallholder farmers that you can see there, who actually resource poor, and they also face a lot of impacts of climate change. So every time when we are building our food system as Africa, we are drawn back by the different risks and the different hazards like climate. We are drawn back by COVID-19, which is also affecting our farmers. But I think another thing that we've learned from Africa that was very clear is that during COVID-19, we also saw some good examples of how Africa struggled to achieve food security. We know that people shared food. We know that farmers were the most actively farming. In Kenya, they said no one should move except farmers. Nothing can move except food. So that shows why movement of food across boundaries is critical. So for Africa to achieve food sovereignty, we need to deal with a lot of issues. How can we set up policies that are good to allow food mobility? How are we also listening to the farmers? So it's a matter of principles. The aid is not bad, but let the aid not dictate the system. Because the food system for Africa is a clear system. But when I listen to my friends calling the Africa vegetables as indigenous vegetables or traditional vegetables, it tells you that we don't even believe that it is what we are right now, when that is what is on my plate today. So why are you calling it traditional? What message are we putting out there? I would also want to talk about the big disconnect between what me as a farmer believes in, what me as a researcher does, and what me as a policy advisor says. So there's a big disconnect. We are also talking to the aid providers with there's some fakeness in this. Are we really representing the farmer's voice? So long as we are not doing that, it is that disconnect where the money is going to the wrong places, and then we keep on trying to get back and saying that international aid is not addressing the issues. But who is giving out the wrong message? Is it the aid providers, or is it those of us who are talking to them? Even our policymakers have a role to play here. Are we telling our donors the truth on what a food system is for Africa, or we are building a food system based on what they want? So those are critical things that we need to look at. But I think at the end of the day, there's something around dignity. We need to respect the farmers. We need to respect those who are feeding on this food, so that whatever we are developing as a food system for Africa, to achieve the sovereignty that we want as Africa, we want some dignity in the food system, so that we are dealing with health issues, and these issues should not be what is actually taking us back. Because we cannot start spending money that is meant for producing food and start using this money on treating diseases that are actually being aggravated by the food system that we're actually adopting. So there are so many issues around here, but it's a matter of principle. Yes, it is good because we are having a lot of shocks, and we need to deal with these shocks in our food system. So we need aid to support that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for all.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us on stage. And we have the last person, the last mind we're going to jump into before I ask you for your opinions. And this is Annie Wakanyi. She's the director of the Global Government Partnerships at One Acre Fund. So she works with development partners and smallholder farmers. And your answer to the question is yes, no, maybe, not so sure.
Thank you so much, Selena. Good evening and good morning to those who have joined us online. So I think it's a complex question, I would say. And I think in my view, development aid can be used to promote food sovereignty in Africa, because it is actually the role of governments to set the policies to ensure that, to safeguard and ensure that the aid is actually used to promote food sovereignty. So I think governments have a very big role to play in terms of ensuring that we have the right policies in place, but also that there's implementation of those policies. So if then we consider that the aid is coming and is being utilized within that context, then that's why I say, looking at the challenge right now, it's actually unacceptable, right? To at this point be thinking about the levels of poverty and hunger that we have. Totally unacceptable. And looking at the challenges that we have right now, including the shocks that Nancy has talked about, the environmental shocks, but also other sorts of crises, the war in Ukraine and the supply chain disruptions that it brought about, we can actually see how we all need a collective action. And that collective action needs to be there and to look at really the farmer as the center of the solution. So we really need to look at really empowering the farmer. So the aid shouldn't be used to disempower them. So it should be the choice of farmers to look at what exactly do they need to be able to improve their productivity, to increase their yields, and to build climate resilience. They have the solutions, and organizations such as One Acre Fund have actually proven that the farmer can be at the center of our work. So if you look at the kind of financing that we have at One Acre Fund, 76% of our budget is actually from farmer revenues. And they keep shaping the program, not as recipients, but actually as active participants. So ensuring that we do that, and then ensuring then that they actually looking at, they are provided with the support they require. So the government also providing public goods, for example, roads, infrastructure, and the policy environment that I talked about. Development partners then coming with the aid that is within that context, the policy context, ensuring that whatever is being promoted is environmentally and socially sustainable. But also looking then at, what is the impact that we're getting, so that development aid needs to deliver impact to the farmers in terms of, poverty alleviation, but also in terms of getting environmental sustainability. So if you look at that, I think I would say that we need to act, and we need to act now. It is so urgent that we do so. I think together collectively, we all have a role to play, private sector as well. I think it's in agreement that we need to act now, right? So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much to all of our speakers, and for pointing out this aspect of maybe developing a new business model. What do we have to develop to get to that future? So if we can get the screen up, it would be lovely, because this is the time I want to hear from the audience. You've had some time to think about the different positions. There was a lot in there that you probably agreed with, maybe some you disagreed with. But if you had to answer the question straight, should development aid be used to promote food sovereignty? What would be your answer? So if you can just use the QR code, head to Slido. We want to hear what you think. And this will help us bring together both the online and the in-person people, and be able to define, where are we all at? And I also want you all, you've heard what you each had to say, to think of the questions you have for each other. I definitely have a few, because as we said, this is about how do we get to the future that we want. We always talk about we need to act now, and sometimes moving too quickly means we've now set down a pathway that perhaps is slowing us down in the future, a pathway that might create dependence, make us more vulnerable to the shocks you were speaking about. So there's a real need to balance the short-term reality, needs, actions with the long-term vision that we have. Okay, so we have most people saying very much so, we need it to get to our future, and a few people who are in the camp of not so sure and maybe it shouldn't. So I want to ask each of us, Dr. Ogada, to you first. Is there something that you heard from the other speakers and the other positions that resonated with you? Can you tell us what that is? And also, is there something you fundamentally disagreed with?
Yes, what I heard is very much what I really agree with is the involvement with the needs and aspirations of the smallholder farmers, who are numerically the vast majority of farmers. And because what we are doing right now, and I'm talking about Kenya, what we are doing right now is usually to serve the external market, the external gaze, these ephemeral, quote unquote, global standards, which we don't. So I know we're not here to criticize organizations, but as a Kenya citizen, I can criticize Kenya government. Our government does not know what they're doing in this area. And I'm talking about over the 20 years I've been in the field. So one thing that's very important to engage these people. What I'd be hesitant to do is to let foreign organizations that necessarily have their own objectives driven by their own structures to take the lead on doing these things. We have to have a more proactive, for lack of a better term, I'll use this popular term, bottom-up. We need to have a sort of bottom-up approach to it, so the objectives come from down there and grow from down there rather than being imposed from the top. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's helpful to hear your perspective in the sense that, we need to inform government policy more effectively and more strongly in order to have the desired results that we want. I want to hear perhaps from you, because you had spoken a bit about the bottom-up processes that already are in place, and you have a sense of confidence in the direction that are moving. I know you've worked with the Kenyan government in a multitude of ways, developing necessary plans. So can you give us your perspective on this? Do you feel that government can honor the dignity, the dignified food system that we so desire? What are some barriers to that, and what are some successes that can leave us hopeful? Yeah, you can have my mic.
I think I'll start by talking about what can make us to succeed. And being one of the advocates of agroecology, where we need to be developing farmer movements. And I think when we develop very strong farmer movements from the ground and farmers who are able to come up and advocate for the policies they want, then we're going to get it right, especially on policy. Because when we talk about bottom-up, are we really, as actors, empowering farmers with the right information for them to act when they're in these movements? So there is some hope because we are seeing farmer movement starting to come up to actually want to talk about issues of sustainability and food sovereignty. I think that's okay. From the Dakar Summit, the Dakar 2 Summit, most of the African presidents really agreed that they need to work towards Africa food sovereignty. And for this vision to be met, they'll definitely have to work with the grassroots. So the sovereignty will not be about the government up, but it will be more about the people being free from hunger. And for you to achieve this, it will not be about the policies that we structure from up, but it will be about people acting. And for people to act, they must be part of the process. So I believe that governments will still come down and see what mechanisms they have to actually work with emerging movements so that we attain the food sovereignty that we are actually looking forward to. And I think according to AFDB, the target is within, I think is it 5 or 10 years, which is very short. So in Kenya, we say masani machache. We don't have too much time to actually start going around and lying around the philosophies and everything. We need to act now, and we need farmers to come up with movements. This week, the seed fairs are on in Kenya to actually promote what some of you call indigenous seed, which is actually the actual seed that farmers are using down. So we are seeing a lot of movements coming out to protect the Africa's food sovereignty, and I think we need to support that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we can clap. I think it's really helpful that you pointed out again, right? That the goal, we get confused between the goal, the vision, and the how. And so when we start judging by, oh, okay, do we have a great policy, right? Did we do the best that we could to inform this policy? That's not the same as better outcomes for the people that we're living with and that we are destined to share our lives with. So it's important to remember that goal. And as you said, to keep it farmer-centric. So I also, I want to hear more from you. Because you serve in this bridging role, you've talked about farmers being a crucial part, an active player in shaping your program, in driving forward the work. What do you see are barriers to achieving that outcome?
Thank you. So I think there are several barriers, but I think I'll start with just the solutions, right? I think we need to really recognize that we have proven solutions. So we do know exactly what's required to transform African food systems. So, you know, in terms of that, I think what is very frustrating is, you know, the level of skill that's required, right? We continue sometimes, especially with development aid, to operate in very small pilots that do not deliver the required level of impact that we have. So if you look at the numbers of smallholder farmers, it's significant. And actually, I think it's a lever. Farmers themselves are a lever because if you look at the numbers, 70% of the world's poor are actually smallholder farmers. So it's a paradox. So looking then at, you know, going beyond pilots is important. So what models can we have that go to skill, to the right level of skill and deliver impact, the required impact? So for example, for 1 Acre Fund, we started in 2006 with only 40 farmers here in Kenya, and we've been able to scale to reaching 4 million farmers last year. So the ability to be able to scale and to also understand that you know, the environments we operate are very context specific. So even when we work in a number of countries, we cannot just be able to transport the model we have in Kenya and, you know, take it to Nigeria, for example. We need to be able to contextualize that to the context. And so I think being able to do that, but fairly quickly, and also being able to be transparent in terms of the funding that's there. How is it being utilized and the impact that it's having? So I think I see a lot of barriers around duplication of efforts as well. So I think it's one to understand that there is great potential in collectiveness and acting together, but it's also very important to ensure that we're not duplicating our efforts. The funding is limited, and so being able to really ensure that we are using it at the right level and meeting those that are most in need is important. And then also, once we get farmers, for example, to the level where they're independent, and that's why it's so important to actually shape the programs with the farmers in mind and have them actually be able to design or to help design the program. Once they have attained resilience, being able to then move on, right? So that you're not creating that dependency that can come. And you can be able to see in terms of metrics, for example, farmers enroll in and out of our programs at will, yeah? So they are able to tell when they need our support and when they do not need. So I think skill and being able to be very farmer-centric and farmer-driven is important. Thank you.
Can I ask you, on that transparency and duplication, what do you think is stopping that transparency from happening now?
I think, lots of different issues, but I think for us is just inability to share data, right? I think everyone is very protective of, what resources do they have, what budgets do they have. I think budget is a very emotive kind of subject. So there isn't much transparency, even amongst ourselves. How much are you spending in this? And I think the government can play a part there, especially at county level. The actors, so that even if it's not transparency, maybe about the donor, the amount of funds, you should be transparent around which farmers are you reaching and with what services, right? So I don't think there exists that platform where you can actually just find out who's working and doing what where. That hasn't, you'll find bits and pieces of information, but it's not very coherent. So finding that information and having that transparency is important. And
you see government as kind of at least at the subnational level, county level, to say, okay, who are the actors here? How long are they going to be here? How are they contributing? That would be useful information for us all to build off of. Wonderful. I kind of want to go to the audience for a moment, just in case there's any questions that are sitting in your minds that you want to pose, or any reflections. If not, I have many. Okay, I saw your hand first. If we could bring a mic to the gentleman right here.
Stand or sit?
You can stand so the cameras can see you, and if you could just quickly share your name.
Okay, let me share my age by standing. My name's Francis Nyagaka. I represent an organization known as Kenya Environment and Waste Management Association, as well as an observer. Now, I was observed something very small around, talking about farmers, seeds, farmers' movements, sustainability, bottom up, bottom down, bottom across. Now, this is something very small you haven't touched, and I haven't heard any of you touch it. Maybe I may want to understand, or know, what's your take, the three presenters, about the use of toxic chemicals in growing food, toxic pesticides that are used. At the end, they are killing the pollinators. At the end, we are going to have fruits that are poisonous. At the another end, these poisonous pesticides and toxic fertilizers have ended up changing the nutrients of many food products within. The answer is there are a lot of emerging diseases out of the use of all these toxic fertilizers. What's your take? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question. It's an important aspect of the future that we want. I think that we agree on nutrition and well-being and health across the system and within people and communities. The question I have to kind of build off of this is to connect to our point now, right? Do we see that aid and the mechanisms that you have in the system are helping deal with issues like this? How could we be better at getting to fund solutions that help us shift to what you would see as a future, whether that's agroecology, whether that's thinking about putting policies in place? Could you give us a bit of a taste of what you think the solutions are, how we can use aid more effectively?
Maybe I can start. So with my ecologist hat on, what Mr. Nyagaka talked about is a symptom of a national sort of disconnect between where we live and what we are doing. Because the use of the toxic chemicals, it comes from the so-called cash crops, exotic livestock that need to be sprayed and dipped every 3 days, seeds that cannot grow in our soils without extra fertilizer, cannot withstand our climate, etc. So this is creating vulnerability, which we are trying to patch up by using chemicals. And it's very harmful, especially from the perspective of the pollinators, aquatic biodiversity, when it all flows into the rivers through the rain. So this is why we need to stop operating in silos. The Ministry of Agriculture, I can tell you for a fact, does not talk to Ministry of Natural Resources or Ministry of Wildlife. They don't talk. And you can see it in the dissonance between their policies. So this is why I think when we have the foreign input in terms of resources or whether it's advice or money, should target what is already there to make it better. But we keep bringing in new things. Or there's this new seed maize that's been brought. There's this new potatoes. There's this new flowers, and all this kind of thing. When you bring something in, you'll have to bring in pesticides. You'll have to bring in fertilizers. And I suspect that's a business model, actually, because these companies, they all sort of follow each other. The seed company, the pesticide company, the fertilizer company. And suddenly there's a business model. And suddenly we are taking advice on agriculture from someone like Bill Gates. Sorry to mention his name. But that's the thing.
So how do you see us moving to a different business model?
I think if we move, when the movement has to start from us, like Kenya, our government has to wake up, start listening to the experts, the people on the ground, and get our policy from there. Right now, if we do have a policy, we are not implementing it. So I think the first onus rests with our government, that we have to have a direction where we want to go. So when anyone is giving us help, it's help in a certain direction. Because right now help is coming, each help is coming with its own direction. And we are having this sort of dissonance that the gentleman there was talking about. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. My professors would always say, you don't get what's fair, you get what you negotiate. And so are we in the position to negotiate well? You had mentioned the narratives. We are not doing a good job at communicating what, are the priorities, where we need to fund. Can you tell us more, Nancy?
Okay, I just want to get back to some of the basic things we were supposed to address as we started this discussion. How is food sovereignty defined? When you look at what the different presidents for Africa talked during the Dakar summit, it tells you that some of them are talking of Africa being a food basket. So they're talking about food sufficiency, having sufficient food. Some of them are talking in terms of ensuring that we eradicate hunger by a certain time. Some of the actors are talking about the issue of farmers being in control of that food system. So there is a rights perspective, there is a sufficiency perspective, but then coming back to another actor who is the consumer, because the consumer also wants to have a say in the type of food that they want to consume. So when we are having this discussion on food sovereignty, we need to be looking at the different definitions that are on the table, because when you're talking to a policymaker, they're talking about food sufficiency. They don't want this hunger crisis to be a repeated crisis in Africa. So even as we have this discussion here as a panel, I think we could also be standing from a different perspective. Are we talking about sufficiency? Are we talking about the rights of the farmers to be in control of the food system and also the markets? But are we also talking about the pesticides? So the issue of the consumer is also becoming very critical, and that is why we are talking of different agroecological movements on how do we reduce on the use of agro inputs. The issues around agroecology is not about stopping to use, but how do we reduce? And from a biodiversity perspective, where I work as WWF, we are worried because of people, but because also of the wildlife, the biodiversity that even these countries depend on. So we know there are good models on how we can farm without overuse of chemicals, but I would also like to say one thing. Some aid is well-intentioned. And we have seen, like in Kenya, what has happened last week or the last 2 weeks. They were able to come up with some, at least of agrochemicals that are hazardous, like we need to whistleblow what is on the market, but is not really good, because what is bad in Europe is also bad in Kenya, isn't it? So if you ban something in Europe, then we need to ban it in Kenya too. So as actors, we need to continue educating consumers and the general public about the food production systems that are not actually healthy to the people and to the ecosystem. But at the end of the day, farmers are the ones producing food, and they're the same farmers using these chemicals who believe that they need to use them to have excess food. So this discussion cascades from the international aid to the markets and then to the real farmers. Are they also having dignity? Do they have some respect to the food they're producing? Or they're putting bad food on the market and eating good food? What we have seen from farmers is that they'll tell you, this is my farm. They're not using a lot of chemicals on their farm, because they think that, okay, the food doesn't need to look beautiful, so I can use this, no much chemicals, but whatever is being pushed to the market has a lot of chemicals. This is also being done by the smallholder farmers we work with, so it's not new. So we all have to take charge of this food system and do the right thing. It's not about having blame games in the food system. Yeah.
We can hear from you, Annie. Anything you want to add to the conversation? Anything you feel like we've missed that needs to be addressed?
So maybe I can share, I totally agree with Nancy's viewpoints here. So I think maybe what I can share is practically what we do at One Acre Fund in terms of this particular concern. So we do have a process of doing environmental screening of our programs. So we have an environmental and social policy that ensures that we have the safeguards and we understand what risks there are for each of our interventions. And then also then being able to, particularly for fertilizer use, ensuring that we are sharing with farmers a more efficient use of fertilizer, right? And also combining organic and inorganic, and ensuring that farmers also do know how to correctly use the inputs is important. And I think maybe the crisis in Ukraine did provide an opportunity because of the supply chain disruptions, to get to look at this issue more critically. How can farmers grow with less use of fertilizer? And that is also then created an opportunity to look at other options as well. Also, in terms of One Acre Fund, we have 1 billion visions to plant, particularly work with farmers to plant 1 billion trees. And we are currently at 170 million, 62 million planted just last year. So it also shows that farmers can be at the center of, the solutions that we need, promoting biodiversity, but also ensuring that they're efficiently using the fertilizer and also combining.
Can I ask you more about, you had talked about, your answer wasn't super clear, but you felt that, hey, we have shocks and we need to ensure that in those moments that there is aid to kind of support this short-term need and move us towards the ideal route in future. Can I hear from you? You have all these projects, you have the safeguards. Concretely, what would it take to use development aid projects so that they can balance the short-term food security needs for the long-term goal of achieving food sovereignty? What are some changes you would recommend, or solutions that how would you see that happening? How can we balance those two?
That's a great question. So I think in terms of just thinking around where is aid deployed, right? Looking at, using aid to fill the market gaps. So for example, continuing to ensure that we are really meeting the needs of those hard to reach, but also the most poor. I think that's important, but also to look at what kind of interventions, what is the path to sustainability for these interventions, whatever is being supported. So having a very clear path, and sometimes that path is not clear at the beginning, at the design, but I think you need to continually challenge those organizations that are being supported through this aid to look at what is the path to sustainability, and also look at as well, how are the farmers, the communities themselves involved in shaping the interventions, and also in terms of monitoring. So that empowerment is so important, and having very clear, I think, metrics to measure against, so that you can be able to see year on year, for example, where you headed, are you making any change? And being able to also, I think sometimes development aid can be very inflexible. So it's important to be flexible and allow the partners, the organizations that are being supported to learn and to make some changes when needed. So I think that flexibility is important, and also really looking at how are these programs particularly interacting with the policies that are in place. Because sometimes we have good policies, but they are ignored sometimes during implementation.
In the moments of crisis, we have to act now, and we are facing multiple crises. It's only the urgency is only getting higher. So we appreciate the moment to stop, to question, to interrogate now, to think about in an ideal world, in this new vision, what could we be doing differently? So we only have a few minutes left. It's pretty late here. So I want to ask you one closing question. So there was never going to be a winner to the debate. It was always with the goal of moving towards those more effective and nuanced solutions that we need now. If you could ask for one thing from a donor, if you could have your dream aid, what would be your ask? Mordecai?
Okay, I'd ask for there's something I'd ask for them to stop doing. And I'll talk about the three things which have been supported by donors that I know. There's been a legislation that outlawed free exchange of seeds in this country. It outlawed farm gate sale of milk. It blocked a lot of livestock movement and outlawed use of farmyard manure. Legislation. And these processes, where the discussions of these processes were all donor supported. These are the things I'd like them to stop doing. And as a substitute to that, I'd rather they did nothing and gave us nothing than do things like that. So I think I'd like the donors to recognize us as people. Not look at the country, not look at the government, but recognize the people and see them. So then when they come from that standpoint, I think whatever they give, which I think comes from a good place, whatever they give will be helpful once they start recognizing us as people and not a ministry, a minister, a government, and that kind of thing, but people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd ask for more trust. Trust to be able to design and not overthink. I think donors are getting into the space of co-designing with partners, which is good. It's a good intention, but that's why sometimes you lose the ownership and bringing the ideas that I think Mordecai is talking about, and being able to infuse thoughts or ideas that are not really suited for the context. So I think more trust and flexibility, trust the communities to know what is best for themselves, and then support that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will not take it as donor or international aid. I just want to talk about any support or investments into the Africa food system should actually really align with the vision of this GLF, where we want a new vision for Earth. We want food systems that are actually ecologically responsive. How do we ensure that the food systems are climate resilient, ecologically responsive, and socially inclusive? If that is well respected, then issues of representation, participation, and trust can be easily covered, but as we also ensure that we are taking care of our planet. So whether you are doing business in the food system, whether you're giving aid, or whether you are just having your investments, that is actually what we want. Because when aid comes, it can come in form of business. So if we only address the aid part, then the businesses can easily mess up the food system. So whichever support or investment comes to Africa must be ecologically responsive and socially inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I really appreciate everyone for staying to be a part of this first ever debate, for all of you for joining us. I know it's not an easy ask to openly disagree with each other on a recorded platform with 7,000 registered participants. So I very much appreciate it, but it's helped me to think about the importance of what we need to do moving forward. The outcomes that we want to bring in tomorrow in day 2 of the conference, which is global. And that is when you want to get the message and the narrative right, when we're talking about what are we asking for. We have the solutions. We've heard from Annie, we have the solutions, but sometimes we're constrained to put them into pilots and we're not able to deliver in the way that we would want to. There's lenses of sufficiency, of farmers' rights, of consumer rights that all need to be considered. There's a key role we could play in informing government, in having better partnership with the knowledge that exists, and clear pathways for sustainability as well. So I appreciate the conversation around how do we move to a more transparent collaboration. This is the heart of what the Global Landscapes Forum has been about. Can we bring everybody in the room so that we can learn from each other, so that we can avoid duplicating efforts, and also so that we can understand these pieces of information, these insights to build our vision. So anyway, thank you everyone so much. We do have a reception coming, but I'll pass it over to, I believe, my MC. But before I do, I wanted to invite, we have a very special moment. You've seen dancing, music, artistry all throughout this. And before this GLF event, we had a huge youth storytelling contest across the continent. Because young people have a lot that they want to share and their visions matter. So I want to now invite Wangui Kimani. She's a poet, she's a writer. She defines her art as flowetry, a fusion of poetry, music, fashion, and her unique presence. She is the winner of that storytelling contest, and she's going to share with us her contribution, which was Tales of Taste. So thank you so much. Join us on stage.
Hello, how are you doing? Just before you start playing the video, turn to your neighbor kindly. Make sure you have a neighbor. Turn to your neighbor. You're not turning to your neighbor. Like oh, sorry. Ask your neighbor, what do you bring to the table? Some of you are not asking your neighbors. Ask your neighbor, what do you bring to the table? Can you hear some people say, I'm the table? It's okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Can play the video. What do you bring to the table when you can't even afford one? When the people you kept your hopes on keep telling you tales on, the rains will ease the pain. The prayers will fill your stomachs. When you clearly know that you are not in pain, you are not tormented. You need no prayers. You are hungry. You need food. I have seen people scramble for food before. And for a minute I thought that they were mannerless. Not until I was in such a position and I understood that actually their lives were dependent on that. I have seen breadwinners consume the bread and stop winning. I have seen cows dying due to recurring droughts. I have seen farmers crying, trying to water their own plants with their own tears. I have seen all this and that. I have seen greedy people feel so much in their plates that finally ended up in the bin. And again, I have seen people feeding from the bin and thanking God for provision. And I have decided to be more intentional about taking care of my land and my people. I'm a child of a farmer. It's seen as a very dirty job. But let me tell you, 3 times a day, I kid you not, you meet that farmer. Do you? Do you remember what you had for breakfast? What you had for lunch? What you had for dinner? You need that farmer. I have tried to make this world a better place. If not by feeding your souls using my words, then by feeding your bodies. I have planted crops, and I have experienced the fulfillment of harvesting them. I have seen my own mother plant crops not only for my own family, but also for others. We said that people perish due to lack of what? People perish due to lack of what? Thank you. But have you seen how many people perish due to lack of food, or even worse, lack of non-nutritious food? Well, we have the ability. We have the ability to make our soil better together. We have the ability to provide resources for our farmers directly. We have the ability to empower our men and women on urban farming, sustainable farming. Again, to your neighbor, tell your neighbor, we cannot solve hunger without you. Make them feel special. We cannot solve hunger without you. Thank you. And in my quest to make a better Africa, I always say, haba na haba, hujaza kibaba, little by little. So let's get to a point where our rice farmers will rise. Our maize farmers will feel amazing. Our tea farmers will not get teased. Our milk farmers will not get milked. Our coffee farmers will at least afford a cup of cappuccino. And our people will not be wiped away by hunger. Ngoy Kimani.
Whoa. I think we should log into GLF Climate right now. We should build on this momentum, right? Yeah, it's been an amazing debate. I mean, climaxed with a very amazing poem. And a special thank you to Salina, our moderator, for moderating such a great session, but also our panelists. Yeah, it was really a tough one, putting them on the spotlight on such a topic, but what a way to close the day. But before we close, allow me to wish our moderator, Salina Abraham, a happy birthday. Come on, we can sing for her. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Salina. Happy birthday to you. I mean, very interesting how she really moderated this session on her special day. So it was a special session on a special day. Yeah, so thanks very much for staying with us until the very end of the day, and we've not yet finished. Yeah, so we have a very special celebration. I mean, it's such a coincidence. We are celebrating 10 years of the Global Landscapes Forum. Yeah, so we are celebrating a number of birthdays, right? Yeah, so please join me at the Karura stage. We shall have food, drinks, have some fun, dance, you know? Yeah, but before we go for that, tomorrow we will shift gears from Africa to a more global perspective, where we shall look at the climate crisis now. But I have a very important announcement to make. Make sure to carry your passport or ID tomorrow, even if you already have your badge. Yeah, so don't forget that. It's very important. Should I repeat? Don't forget to carry your passport or ID tomorrow. Yeah, so day 2 will start with a private tour of the Karura Forest at 8 a.m. in the morning, starting right here at the C4 Ecraft campus. So if you've pre-registered, please join in, but you can also use the link in the agenda to still pre-register tonight so that you can be able to join. After that, sessions will start at 9 a.m. Don't forget to take a look at the agenda to see what's on, and also to bookmark your favorite sessions so that you don't miss them. Simply scan the QR code on your badge. I mean, it's that easy for you to really get the agenda. You just have it in your neck. Yeah, so once again, thank you everyone for joining us. And it's been a pleasure hosting you today. And please join me for the special music performance at the Karura stage, and hope to see you tomorrow. Goodbye.